Today we will discuss about the incidence of taxation, right? Incidence of taxation. Okay. As we all well aware that, see, there are two concepts to be studied while analyzing the incidence of taxation. Okay. Impact, shifting and incidence. Right? We all know that direct taxes cannot be shifted or passed on from one person to another person. Right? Because direct taxes are imposed upon, see, the income or wealth of the concerned individuals. Okay? Yeah. Direct tax we mean progressive taxation. The schedule of progressive tax rates is one in which as and when the income or tax base increases, the rate of taxation will also increase. Okay? The amount of tax payable is calculated by multiplying the tax base or income with the tax rate. Okay? In short, direct taxes cannot be passed on or shifted from one person to another. That is the impact, the immediate money burden and the incidence. The ultimate money burden of the tax will be upon one and the same person in case of direct taxes. Okay. But on the other hand, indirect taxes, that is excise duty, that is commodity taxation, today otherwise known as GST, goods and services tax, can be easily shifted, okay, or passed on from one person to another person. Generally, the impact of GST and the incidence of GST will be upon different individuals. Okay? The impact of GST will be upon the owner of the company or the manufacturer of a company who pays the tax to the government for the first instance, who pays or who feels the impact of the tax. That is why here it is said impact means the immediate money burden of the tax. But that concerned manufacturer in his turn just just shifts the burden of taxation to the retailer by raising the price of the commodity. Okay? Yeah, the wholesaler or the manufacturer of the company shifts the burden of taxation to the retailer by way of raising the price of the commodity. Okay? In short, see, indirect taxes or excise duty or GST can be easily shifted, passed on from one person to another person. Okay? The impact and incidence of GST will be, we can say, upon different individuals. Right? And shifting is the process by which the burden of taxation can be shifted from, see, the manufacturer or the wholesaler to the retailer. And the retailer in his turn pass the burden of taxation to the consumers, right, by or through raising the price of the commodity by the full amount of the tax. That is why here it is said that in case of GST or indirect taxes, the impact, that is the immediate money burden, and incidence will be upon different persons. Okay. Here we thoroughly discussed three concepts: impact, immediate money burden of the tax; shifting, this is the process by which the tax burden will be shifted from one person to another person; and incidence, that is the ultimate resting place of the tax burden. In the case of direct taxes, personal income tax, see, the impact and incidence will be upon the one and the same person. It means, see, in the case of direct taxes, the burden of taxation cannot be shifted or passed on from one person to another. That I told you. But in the case of GST, it is very easy from the part of the taxpayers to shift or to pass the burden of taxation from one person to another person through raising the price of the commodity by the full amount of the tax, right? And we all know that, see, the prices of a commodity or the pricing, the process of pricing will be determined on the basis of the quantity demanded and quantity supplied of that commodity. The price of every commodity will be determined on the basis of the quantity demanded and quantity supplied. We know it thoroughly. And here the notable point is, if a commodity is facing perfectly elastic demand, and supposing if the government levies taxes upon such commodities, what will happen? Yeah. See, if a commodity is facing perfectly elastic demand, we mean a slight incremental change in its price will lead to a large decremental change in its quantity demanded. In other words, if a commodity is facing perfectly elastic demand and if the government levies taxes upon such commodities, see, the impact and the entire tax burden will be borne by the sellers themselves. Here the sellers cannot pass the burden of taxation to the consumers through raising the price of the commodity, because if a commodity is facing perfectly elastic demand, a slight or a minute incremental change in its price will lead to, see, a large decremental change in its quantity demanded. That is, nothing will be demanded, nothing will be bought if there is a slight incremental change in its price. That is, in the case of a commodity is facing perfectly elastic demand. Okay. On the other hand, supposing if a commodity is facing perfectly inelastic demand, by perfect inelasticity we mean the same quantity of the commodity will be bought, the same quantity of the commodity will be demanded, whatever may be the level of prices, because it is the case of necessaries. Okay, and if the government levies taxes, GST upon necessaries or the commodity which is facing perfectly inelastic demand, yeah, the entire tax burden will be borne by the consumers. Here the sellers or the suppliers of the commodity just shifts the entire burden of taxation to the consumers through raising the price of the commodity, right? Because the commodity is facing perfectly inelastic demand. Okay, these two concepts, see, perfect elasticity and perfect inelasticity of demand can be easily explained by using diagrams. Okay, we know, see, if a commodity is facing perfectly elastic demand, see, the demand curve definitely has been drawn quite horizontally along the x-axis. We all know it. And it means that if there is a slight incremental change in price will lead to a large decremental change in its quantity, or nothing will be demanded by the consumers if there is a slight incremental change in the price of the commodity, because that commodity is facing perfectly elastic demand. Here the entire tax burden will be borne by the sellers themselves. The sellers cannot in any way pass the burden of taxation to the consumers by raising the price of the commodity. Yeah, on the other hand, I told you, see, if a commodity is facing perfectly inelastic demand, here the demand curve has been drawn quite vertically along the y-axis. It means that whatever may be the prices, okay, if there is a high incremental change in the level of that commodity, the prices of that commodity, yeah, the consumer will purchase, see, the same quantity as before, because the commodity is facing perfectly inelastic demand, or it is the case of most necessaries. It is the case of necessaries, most urgent ones. Yeah, in this case, the entire tax burden will be upon the consumers. And once again, by incidence of taxation, we mean the ultimate resting place of the tax burden. Okay, here we will discuss other two concepts also. That is impact, the immediate money burden of the tax. Okay, and shifting, the process by which the burden of taxation is passed on or shifted from one person to another. In the case of direct taxes, see, the entire money burden, see, that is the impact will be upon the one and same person. That is, in the case of direct taxes, the burden of taxation cannot be shifted from one person to another person, because this is a progressive rate of progressive taxes. But on the other hand, the entire indirect taxes, that is GST, can be, the amount of GST can be shifted or passed on from one person to another, because the amount of GST includes the price of the commodities. And if a commodity is facing perfectly elastic demand, the entire tax burden will be borne by the sellers themselves. Here the sellers cannot pass the burden of taxation to the consumers by raising the price of the commodity, because the commodity is facing just a perfectly elastic demand. If the sellers pass the burden of taxation to the consumers by raising the price of the commodity, nothing will be demanded. Okay, yes. And on the other hand, if a commodity is facing perfectly inelastic demand, and if the government levies taxes upon such commodities, the entire tax burden will be borne by the consumers. Ready? Yeah. If you like the video, give me a big thumbs up. Subscribe my channel and enable the bell icon too, so that you will get my latest videos as notifications. Thank you very much.